Can you right now denounce white supremacy and the group that espoused it?
The president has denounced white supremacy, the KKK, and hate groups in all forms. His record on this is unmistakable, and it's shameful that the media refuses to cover it.
Well, if you watched the show yesterday, that was a familiar exchange now, wasn't it? So far, the Republican response to the president's comments have been an awkward dance of rebuke, embrace, and silence. Here's Mitch McConnell, for example, yesterday afternoon.
I want to associate myself with the remarks of Senator Tim Scott that he put out earlier today. I think he said it exactly correctly, and that's exactly how I would express myself on that issue.
What are those remarks? Can you explain what Tim Scott said that you endorse?
Yeah, he said it was unacceptable not to condemn white supremacists, and so I do so in the strongest possible way.
Instead of the Proud Boys station, stand by and stand back. Was that appropriate for him to say that specifically about the Proud Boys?
Yeah, I think I just answered that question. Anyone else?
The hand-wringing from Republicans comes as the president's campaign is reeling. They are trailing in the polls, and according to NBC's analysis, they are being just pounded on the airwaves by the Biden campaign. Trump is being outspent on the airwaves in battleground states by more than a 2-to-1 margin, and we're going to dive into these numbers in a moment. By the way, it's just in the month of September, this advantage. We've seen this movie so often from Republicans, and it usually ends with them fully backing the president when push comes to shove. But is this round of hand-wringing different? Are we too close to the election? We'll see. It is a question of major importance as we inch closer to Election Day that the president is clearly expecting to lose. And his recent behavior clearly signals he's willing to take drastic and desperate measures to try to cling to power. Joining me now outside the White House is NBC's Carol Lee. Also with us is Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times and an MSNBC political analyst. Brendan Buck, a former top advisor to Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan and John Boehner, and Steve Kornacki, where else but at the big board with more on that massive campaign ad spending divide. But let's begin at the White House, if we will. Carol Lee. Carol, it does seem as if, you know, there's so many rules of crisis management, but a simple one is sometimes just rip the Band-Aid off. And they've let this story on white supremacists linger a second day. Frankly, it's campaign malpractice, which tells me this is the president who's being stubborn on this.
Yeah, Chuck, it certainly seems that way, that he's digging in on this. He doesn't want to come out and say that he misspoke or said something wrong. Kayleigh McEnany was asked this multiple times. It was not by just John Roberts, but was pressed on this and just wouldn't definitively say what I think that the questioners were looking for, what reporters were asking, is just to say, yes, I denounce, and the president denounces white supremacy. Part of the reason why this, I think, Chuck, continues to be an issue is because we all know what it looks like when President Trump wants to denounce something. And this isn't it. He, on any given issue, makes it crystal clear on where he stands on something that he opposes. And we just haven't seen that same sort of sledgehammer that he takes to anyone or anything that he's against, and have him use that rhetorically against white supremacy. So we haven't seen that same emphasis from him on this issue. And that's in part why this continues to be something that has legs. They're pointing to the president's past statements. They're saying yesterday he was asked this and he said, sure. But again, it's not this definitive, robust sort of denouncement that you would expect from the president of the United States, and you would expect from a president who's in a campaign and has this story hanging over him for now 2 days.
I am curious, do they accept, does the campaign, Carol, accept the idea that this debate set them back? We know the president told his rally, I won, and Jason Miller was on here yesterday touting fan polls, internet polls, which, of course, aren't scientific. Every scientific poll seems to indicate that it wasn't even that close, that the perception was the president really lost this debate. Does the campaign know this?
Yeah, and privately, that's just not what they're saying. A number of the president's allies and advisors are worried what happened at the debate. They're described as in shock, some of them, over particularly the president's comments about Proud Boys. And when you're coming out of the first debate where the stakes were really high for the president, he needed to turn the trajectory of this race around, and you hear the allies saying that the outcome they could hope for is they didn't lose any votes. You know, that's not really saying that the president won in that debate. So they are worried about it. And the president is getting, as is typical, different advice from different advisors. Some are telling him to just plow ahead, don't change course, don't retreat on anything that you said, and just continue to be yourself in the next debate and on the campaign trail. And there are others who are saying, you know, they want him to try to do something to change it up. And when it comes to the next debate, they do think the next debate would be a better venue for the president because he's going to be asked questions by people in the audience, not necessarily just a moderator. Yes, that's what some of his allies and advisors have said to us. But you know, the one thing that is true, and they also would really like the president particularly to just let Joe Biden talk. That's one thing you hear pretty consistently is that the president gave Joe Biden a number of off-ramps where he wasn't pinned down on things, and they want him to just talk more and have the president talk less. But at the same time, all of them acknowledge the president does not want to be told what to say or what to do, and he's going to approach it how he wants to.
Peter Baker, you know, at this point, does it feel as if this, you know, Joe Biden didn't have a great debate performance, but Donald Trump didn't really give him a chance to have a good one or a bad one. In some ways, did Donald Trump rescue Joe Biden?
Well, Donald Trump did what he didn't want to do, which is to make it all about him. I mean, he may have wanted to do that, but the necessity at this stage of the campaign is to turn it from a referendum on Trump, which he's been losing, into a choice between him and Biden and show why Biden isn't an acceptable alternative. Nobody had a chance to really evaluate Biden because all we heard was President Trump. And every commentary, every review, every discussion about the debate was about President Trump rather than about Vice President Biden. And so in that sense, he lost an opportunity to transform this race into something he wants it to be or should want it to be, which is why the other guy isn't qualified or isn't acceptable as an alternative to me.
Peter, do you have a theory as to why the president just can't bring himself to immediately denounce white supremacists? Whatever form they take. This is a 4 or 5 year pattern with him.
It is. And that question to Kayleigh McEnany today, frankly, should be a softball. And any other White House, Republican or Democrat, that's an easy, you know, smack out of the park question to ask. It's not hard. It's not a trick question. No, it's not a reporter's trick question. It really is basic. And no, I think that the fact that he has consistently responded in the way you saw the other night, from Charlottesville all the way through Tuesday, indicates that he is uncomfortable with the idea of alienating anybody who supports him, that he feels that if he is too full-throated, presumably, he's going to turn away voters, and he can't afford to do that. But, you know, this is a problem for the Republican Party. Brendan's he'll talk about this, but his former bosses and a lot of other Republicans have spent a lot of time trying to diversify and reach out beyond, to the non-white part of America, which is growing demographically. And this, I think, is a real concern for Republicans who'd like to grow the party, not shrink it.
No, and this always sets back those efforts. I'm sure, Brendan, I know I've had these conversations with you, Brendan, about the efforts when you were with Speaker Ryan in trying to do that outreach and how it would get undermined at times. But let me ask you this. Is the hand-wringing for real this time?
Yeah, I think it's hand-wringing, but it's also just confusion. I mean, you don't have to have a sophisticated political antenna to understand that condemning white supremacy should be easy. I think Mitch McConnell there, sometimes it's hard to tell what Mitch McConnell's emotions are, but I think that was a perturbed Mitch McConnell. They don't want to be talking about
that
this.
Was. Yeah.
He's got to be frustrated. I mean, look at, he's trying to hold on to his majority. And look, today you're seeing that they're having to come in and spend money in South Carolina. That tells you the political shifting that is taking place. Places that should be layups for Republicans to hold on are seeing white voters, educated voters, women voters running away. And they're just so frustrated that something like that, we always talk about the president and his flirting with white supremacy. We're political junkies. We're very online. Sure. This was the first time where you've got the majority of the voting public tuned in and see the president presented very clearly with a question, can you condemn white supremacy? And he struggles with it. That is just so confounding. And I think most people, they just can't make it. I think Peter is absolutely right. He doesn't want to tell anybody who supports him that they are bad. In his mind, if you are for him, you are good. And that is the only way he thinks. And for everybody else, that's just crazy.
So, Brendan, what does Lindsey Graham say in this final month